So you need to figure out who you're trying to speak to. And it might sound like common sense, but you'd be surprised how many brands don't really know. I talk to potential clients all the time and I'll ask, who's your ICP, or who's your target audience? And the answer will start with, well, this is who buys from us. And that very well might be your ICP, but the point is to create and build the story for who you want to speak to.
Before we start the show, I have a quick question for you. Is your resume stuck in the rejection pile? At Resume Assassin, I create powerful resumes that showcase your skills, experience, and achievements, getting you noticed by recruiters. I'll also optimize your LinkedIn profile, transforming it into a magnet for opportunity. Visit resumeassassin.com today and take charge of your job search. Visit resumeassassin.com. So you guys, today's guest is someone who just gets the power of storytelling, and not just as a creative tool, but as a strategic force in marketing. Brianna Doe is the founder and CEO of Verbatim, a hybrid influencer agency and content studio, helping startups and SMBs write scroll-stopping content and scalable marketing programs. You may have seen her insights featured in places like Fast Company, CNBC, HubSpot, and the American Marketing Association. Or maybe you caught her speaking on stages and shining on LinkedIn as an amazing creator that I like to follow personally. So in this episode, we're diving into a topic close to both of our hearts. What is this story really telling us? And we'll unpack how strategy and storytelling come together really to create marketing that actually works, not just looks good. So, if you're someone that just absolutely loves content, again, like I do, loves writing, or just wants to make your marketing mean something, then you're absolutely in the right place. But before we really dive into the topic today, I want to ask you a question, Brianna, that I ask all my guests. In 10 words or less, what's the best piece of advice that someone has ever given you?
Okay, so I think it's less than 10 words. The best advice I've ever gotten was always advocate for yourself and never self-reject, which I just thought was so impactful because when my mentor gave me that advice, I was at a point in my career where all I was doing was self-rejecting, if I'm being honest. I was counting myself out before I ever even went for the opportunity or pursued the new role or whatever the case may be. And she just made a really good point. You aren't giving people the chance to say yes or no to you. You're just taking yourself out of the race before you're even in it. And so learning how to advocate for myself, put myself into these rooms and these situations where I could grow, and then also give people the opportunity to support me and choose me, it just changed the entire trajectory of my career.
That's powerful because I think that I see a lot of people encouraging their friends, encouraging their peers, their colleagues, but then when it comes to ourselves, we have all of this negative self-talk. So it's empower yourself, support yourself, you can do it. So I absolutely love that piece of advice.
Yeah, I think it's hard to encourage yourself, right? Or to advocate for yourself because we see everything that we do wrong, for lack of a better term. Mm-hmm. But we also, each of us brings something unique to the table, and I think that's really important to celebrate.
Yeah, absolutely. You've built Verbatim into kind of a go-to agency for startups and SMBs. So what gap did you see in the market that really inspired you to start it?
Yeah, there were two gaps. So the first one was, for context, throughout my career, I always worked in-house, even though I had, fractional roles on the side. And I was typically at really fast-paced, very lean startups. So sometimes we were lucky enough to have a little bit of budget for freelancers or for an agency partner. And when I started thinking very seriously about launching Verbatim, I thought back to all of those experiences and asked myself, okay, what did I like about my agency experiences and what didn't I like? And the thing that stuck out was, yes, I had agency partners, but they didn't have the flexibility that I needed. Verbatim has SOWs and scopes of work and agreements and all of that too. But there is this element of working with startups where you just have to be willing to be as flexible and pivot as quickly as they do. And they might need help with content one week and then an influencer campaign the next. And then maybe they need just some help with paid social the next week. And so having boundaries, yes, but understanding how you could also come alongside them and be more of an in-house partner rather than just this third-party provider. That's one gap that I really wanted to fill. And then for B2B influencer marketing specifically, which is one of our core service offerings, not brand new, but it's very new to B2B. Influencer marketing is not something that a lot of B2B marketers have done or have experience with. And so there's a level of education that comes alongside this work, not just building the campaigns and programs themselves. And I really want to make sure that both brands and creators are protected in this space. So that's the other gap.
I love that. So you've worked really across content, social, influencer, demand generation, you name it. How do you decide what a story brand really needs to tell first?
That's a great question. Well, okay, so you need to do a couple of things first. You need to figure out who you're trying to speak to. And it might sound like common sense, but you'd be surprised how many brands don't really know. I talk to potential clients all the time and I'll ask, who's your ICP, or who's your target audience? And the answer will start with, well, this is who buys from us. And that very well might be your ICP, but the point is to create and build the story for who you want to speak to. And so understanding who you want to target and who you want to speak to, and then understanding what will resonate with them. Like not just what will resonate with your CEO or your CMO, or what story do they think you need to tell, but when you do that customer research or that ICP research, where are they living on the internet and offline? What kind of content resonates with them? What matters to them? What do they value and what do they believe? And then crafting the story around that rather than kind of trying to shove them into a box.
Yeah. So how do you really figure out what they value, what they believe? How do you figure out what story you should be telling to that ICP? Once you figure out who's your ideal customer, how do you get the nitty-gritty details?
Yeah, so it depends on, I would say, your budget and the stage of your company. So a couple options here. The reason I say that is because if you have the budget, you can go out and get focus groups. You can do interviews. You can enlist a third party to help you gather that information. I love that. It makes it a lot easier, right? You can really, it's like the experience that you want them to have and the questions that you're trying to get answered. But if you don't have the budget for that, the next step I would recommend is interviewing your current customers that do align with the ICP that you're trying to target. And so that's why I bring up the stage of the company, because if you're brand new and don't necessarily have customers yet, we'll have to go to the third option. But for that second option, if you have an existing customer base, just talk to them. I think we hear it all the time, but I consistently speak to marketers who just don't talk to their talk to their customers. They don't talk to the sales team. They don't talk to the customer support team. Like, understanding and learning from other departments is a big part of this as well, because they're also speaking to that audience and learning from them every day and trying to work with them. And so, enlisting your existing customer base, enlisting your other departments is going to be huge in this space, and it gives you an opportunity to work cross-functionally. Now, let's say you don't have the budget and you're brand new and don't have that many customers, maybe any customers yet. At that point, you're going to have to go grassroots. I mean, there are multiple ways you can go about this. I would still think of it as creating like a focus group of sorts, but you might be sourcing people from your network that align with your ICP, from your indirect network. You're going to have to get creative and scrappy, but I think the thread that weaves all of those together is you have to talk to the people that you want to target and ask them the questions that will get you to that story that you need to build.
Yeah, I think that this is a critical piece that a lot of businesses are missing. It's whether you're a solopreneur, a small business, a startup, or an established organization, it's like the answer is right there. You just have to go out and you have to find it. You have to talk to people. You have to have these focus groups, do these interviews. Like you said, Brianna, whether it's with your existing customer base or if you're brand new, going out and building a focus group of a group of people that may be your ideal clients, and figuring out, get inside their head. What are they thinking? What drives them? What makes them feel, emotionally attached to different things? And then create your content and create your brand based on that, because otherwise it just kind of feels like you're throwing darts, right? Like, if you're just creating content and like, hopefully, let's cross our fingers and hopefully this resonates with somebody, then you just can kind of start to feel like you're just spinning your wheels.
Yeah, exactly. And you bring up a good point, because I do think there's an element of this. Implementation is important. Like, you have to know, if you're the leader, managing this marketing team, or your team of one, or maybe you just have a small team in general, you have to give yourself and your team members the space and the grace to experiment and learn along the way, because you are still going to be testing content, even though it's within the parameters of what you're learning about your ICP and target audience. You have to give yourself time to see what works and what doesn't work, and you have to align on what success looks like so that if an experiment is actually working.
Yeah. So let's talk just a little bit about storytelling and then kind of the strategy behind it. How do you make sure a brand's content isn't just pretty, but that it actually performs?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be the first to say, as a consumer, I love aesthetically pleasing content. I think we all do, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, and I definitely we all see the power and the value in a good brand and good branding, but we're also oversaturated with content, and a lot of it is aesthetically pleasing. Like if I got on TikTok right now, I could scroll for hours.
Yeah,
I do
right.
sometimes, right? Like Instagram, same thing. You can scroll for hours. I can't tell you maybe the last 5 posts that I saw or the last 10, but there was one that stuck out, right? And so I think it goes back to understanding who you're trying to speak to and why and what resonates with them. Like, depending on your audience, there will be some audiences that are looking for more informational content or educational, others that want to be entertained, others that want to just stay informed in general or like feel like they're part of a community. And most audiences are going to be a mix of all of the above. And so, yes, like don't sacrifice the aesthetics of your content, but also be willing to, like we said earlier, experiment with different types of content and also create a wide range of it. Like you never know necessarily what's going to resonate until you try it. And I also think this is where having metrics for success really come in handy, because what does it mean for content to perform well? For one brand, it's going to mean more impressions or more, organic traffic. For others, it's going to mean more clicks or more, like book demos or trial signups. And so understanding that and understanding that different types of content will also have different focuses, right? Or like different goals. That's a really important part as well.
Could you give us an example of maybe a current or, a previous client where you really successfully figured out who their ICP was and then created content that really resonated with that audience? Could you give us just some really tangible examples?
Yeah. So we have a client that is a vitamin supplement company. They've been around for, a long time, like 50, 60 years, something like that. And they're going through, or when we first started working together, they were going through a bit of a metamorphosis. They were trying to understand who their audience was or who their target audience was, because they were really expanding their product lines and their product offerings. And so, you had like the vitamin B supplements, then you also had things like creatine that like athletes use and stuff like that. So trying to understand who they were targeting. And so for us, it was a mix of, they were looking at, paid search and stuff like that, paid social, and also organic content, organic social and just blog content. Like what do we really need to lean into and leverage? So we took a step back and had to segment basically their product offerings. Like this product offering or this product line, we're going to target towards athletes, fitness enthusiasts. We got specific with it between the ages of 25 and 34, whatever the case may be. And these other supplements are for an older demographic. They typically, hang out here online. Like these are the kind of creators that they trust, things like that. And this product line is designed for families. So we're targeting parents with kids between the ages of XYZ. And so from that point, it became just a lot of conversations around what motivates those specific demographics, right? Like fitness enthusiasts and athletes, what kind of content do we need to create? What's the messaging? Where do we drive the ads? Versus the older demographic that really wasn't spending as much time online, but was looking up articles on how to age and like how to age in a healthy way or age gracefully, things like that. And so we created this mix of what I alluded to earlier, which was informational, educational, and entertaining content. Perfect example, we did a couple of blog posts. I know people say blog posts are dead. They're actually not. But we did a range of blog posts that just focused on understanding what each supplement, like how to use each supplement and who it was designed for, with a very subtle CTA at the end. And that actually ended up driving, I think, 3 times as many clicks and conversions as some of our other blog posts. And so just finding ways to integrate the brand into content that could stand on its own and be valuable and impactful without the brand mention was key for us.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned, this content that's informational, educational, and entertaining. Because I think, when I see a lot of individuals or companies creating content, they're not really, maybe they do understand who their audience is, but they're just not getting that emotional reaction from the audience that they're trying to reach. And I know that you mentioned, on TikTok or Instagram or whatever social media platform you're on, it's easy to just scroll and scroll and scroll, and there are all of these really captivating, entertaining posts that we see. Even on, LinkedIn now, it's becoming huge. And so I've seen you use, kind of the term scroll stopping. So what actually makes content pause-worthy? And kind of the chaos of today's digital world.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite phrases. It's the name of my podcast too, Stop the Scroll. I'm just kind of obsessed with it. I mean, the classic marketer answer, it's going to depend on who your audience is. I think there are the technical things that we can all keep an eye on, right? So if you're doing reels on Instagram or video on TikTok, having the hook right at the beginning, hooking the viewer with whatever it may be. Good visuals, good graphics, text on the screen that shows them exactly what they're about to, stay and watch or listen to, keeping it below 30 seconds, above 30 seconds, depending on the day and the algorithm. So there's stuff like that. There are technical things that you can keep an eye on, but it all just goes, I mean, I know I sound like a broken record, but it all goes back to understanding what your audience is actually looking for.
Yeah.
Very good example. I worked for a fintech startup and we were targeting accountants and like heads of accounting, VP of accounting, it was like manager and above. And, I had my own ideas on what would resonate with them. As somebody who literally has never worked in accounting, I just decided that I knew exactly what they wanted. And then I started doing the interviews. I interviewed our own head of accounting, and then I also interviewed some others as well, and found out, okay, they don't even need more newsletters in their inbox because they're already getting a ton of spam just like the rest of us, or they're already juggling a million emails. These are some of the podcasts they typically listen to. This is who they trust. And when it comes to content, here are the questions that they're typically asking themselves or looking for answers to. And what was interesting is one thing that popped out in multiple conversations was accountants were looking for places to learn from other accountants, but in a low lift way, or to just stay on top of like trends, anything new happening in the financial sector, but in a way that was low lift and didn't require a lot from them. And so we crafted content that just gave them the news on a weekly basis of what was happening around the world in finance and just in business. And that was some of our best performing content. So just understanding, it might not seem the most exciting to you, right? Or it might not seem like it'll resonate, but if you're doing the work and experimenting, you will start to narrow down what's going to work and what isn't, and what will keep them on the page.
Yeah, you guys, so it all comes back to that research. Don't just try to create content that you think is going to resonate with the audience. Actually talk to your audience and figure out what it is that they want to see, because it could be something just completely different or something that you hadn't even thought of at all.
Yeah, and also be willing to learn from the brands around you and your competitors too. I mean, look at who your target audience is following online and then what kind of content they're creating, what resonates. I think that's a really important piece too. There is so much content out there and we can learn from all of it and then put our own unique spin on it. And I think that's really important.
No, absolutely. And I was listening to the Boss Babe podcast last week, and she was talking about content and just how important it is. And not only doing research with your target audience, but another thing that you could do is just figure out, okay, who are the top content creators within my category or within my space? And then figure out, okay, what posts are performing really, really well for them, and then sort of repurpose that type of content to make sense for you, for your brand, for your target audience, and those types of things. Is that a strategy that you've seen has worked well? Yeah,
it's definitely important to, put the brand spin on it. But I think content creators are a great tool in this space. They're building trust every day with their audiences. They're creating entertaining content or informational content, whatever the case may be. And they're doing a great job, right? They're building really, really engaged communities. And so there is something that as brands we can learn from that. And then as an influencer agency, I have to say, you can also partner with those creators too and co-create content. You can do sponsored posts, yes, but like the more you can integrate them into your marketing strategy, that's a great way to build trust.
Yeah. What's a kind of, speaking of, partnering with some of those influencers, and I know you mentioned influencer marketing. What's a trend in influencer marketing that you think is just completely misunderstood or overhyped?
Ooh, you know what? This might be a spicy take, but I don't know if you see content like this, especially on LinkedIn, but I see a lot of people complaining about sponsored posts, like seeing influencers do sponsored posts and saying, it doesn't work because of X, Y, and Z. Somebody's been doing this for over 10 years. It works. Like there's a reason that people are still doing this and that brands are leveraging it. I don't know why. And it's not just marketers. Like it's people in other industries too that are upset about sponsored posts. First of all, I think it's important to remember content creators put out a lot of free content. It's a lot of work. And so it makes sense that they would want to partner with brands that can help kind of sponsor that. But then also, like I said, there's a reason that this has been and is still a very booming and thriving industry. Like it is, you have these creators that, like I said earlier, are building so much trust and building deeply engaged communities, and then brands are partnering with them to build credibility and trust. That is huge. And I think just like organic content, it is important to know what your goals are. Are you trying to drive brand awareness? Are you trying to drive book demos, things like that, so you can work with the right creators. But sponsored posts work. You just have to be willing to build out like a full campaign and understand what your goals are, and then set the influencer up for success.
Yeah. Can you talk, I know that you mentioned that you're working with, influencer marketing more in the B2B space. Could you talk to us a little bit more about what that looks like, and maybe what's the difference between the B2C influencer marketing versus B2B?
Yeah. So we're actually pretty equally split between B2B and D2C or B2C. I got my start in B2C about 10 or 11 years ago. And then I wouldn't say transition into B2B because I still do both, but I started working in B2B about 5 or 6 years ago. It's interesting. I do think B2B brands can learn a lot from B2C in terms of how to structure influencer campaigns and programs, but it is also a very different experience, right? If we pick a standard B2C brand, like Stanley, right? There isn't much that you need to build in terms of like story. There isn't much in terms of like a sales cycle or a deal cycle. You work with some influencers, they promote the product, maybe you do it for 3 months, 6 months. People will convert or they won't. They might not convert immediately, but they will 15 days later, things like that. B2B, I mean, it's business to business, which we all know. So there's more red tape, most likely. It's not just a one and done. This person decides we're going to use this product or service. Now we're going to implement it for the whole company. Sales cycles and deal cycles are longer. And it's very important to build trust and credibility, because now you're working with, or you're trying to get the attention of somebody who works for a business and has to make sure that they're able to justify this purchase that they're making on behalf of the brand. And so I think the way we approach influencer marketing is different in that sense too. You're going to work with influencers who have built a lot of trust and credibility with their audience. In B2C, it's similar, but you can also get away with just working with people that create cool content. But there's a trust factor in B2B that you can't skip it. Like you can't try and minimize that or avoid it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I, kind of pivoting a little bit to, LinkedIn, because I know that you're a pretty big content creator on LinkedIn personally for your own personal brand. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because, I know that there are a lot of people right now that are actively trying to build their personal brand on LinkedIn. They're actively trying to build content that resonates with their target audience. Tell us a little bit more about your journey and how has your content and your story kind of changed and evolved over time on LinkedIn?
Yeah, it's been fun. So I started writing on LinkedIn in 2022, so a little over 3 years ago. I'd had a LinkedIn profile since what felt like the beginning of time, but just since college. We all made it. Your professor tells you to make it. Yeah. Yep. I would log on once a year, look for a job, find a job, and then get off LinkedIn until I was looking for another job. You get it. And so, but I started staying on LinkedIn longer and longer. Like I was starting to see content, people talking about what they were learning at work or, this event they'd gone to. And I was like, oh, I did not realize this was kind of like a social media platform.
Yeah.
And, I've spent so many years writing content for brands and speaking in the brand's voice and writing content for CEOs. I started to wonder, like, I knew I had my own voice. I've always been a writer. I've always loved to. But could I actually do it for myself online? Like, is that something that could be interesting? And so I just decided to try it. I did not expect to build any sort of audience, to be clear. Like, I was expecting to treat it like a professional journal and just talk about what I was learning in marketing. But going back to our earlier conversation, that didn't really resonate with me. Like, I was working in marketing all day. I didn't want to dissect it after work too.
Yeah.
And what I thought was really interesting instead was talking about my professional journey in general. Like what I learned about leadership. At this point, I was working in-house. So what I was learning about like job hunting and managing up and navigating corporate culture. And that was what was resonating with people too. Like just having these honest conversations about the corporate world. And then it was a pretty seamless transition to when I launched Verbatim and went into entrepreneurship. I just shifted to kind of building that in public and talking about what I was learning there. And I think it's interesting. Like when we talk about personal branding, yes, maybe your goal is to build an audience, and that's great. But I think it's even more important that the content resonates with you as the person creating it, and that it's something that feels sustainable. Like it is a long game, and I think when we talk about personal branding, we think of it as just this thing that we build online, but it should be reflective of who you are and how you show up in real life and offline. And so understanding what resonates with you and with the audience that you're trying to build, and then finding that happy medium so that you can create content and, kind of build that thought leadership is really crucial.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that that's a great point to really figure out what matters to you the most when it comes to content, especially from a personal branding perspective, because like you said, it's the long game. I mean, you can't post 2 times and expect, your audience to just absolutely blow up and expand overnight. It's day over day, every single day grinding, and maybe not necessarily grinding, but there is a point where it's like, if you want to grow that audience, you do need to be very, very consistent. So, putting in that personal touch and really bringing in experiences and learnings and different things from your own personal life can really help take that content on LinkedIn to the next level. And I know that's something that I'm working on personally is, I have a hard time opening up to people. So just trying to be a little bit more vulnerable and posting more about my own personal life and incorporating that into the content that I create. And I do think that that's something that's missing right now with the explosion of content creators on LinkedIn is that personal aspect. And maybe part of that is AI and, people just kind of using AI to create the content, but not really taking the time that's necessary to really personalize it.
Yeah, you brought up a lot of good points. Consistency, I completely agree. And I think it's also important to remember that consistency looks different for everybody. Like I don't post every day. People told me that from the minute I started. And, I have a job, first of all. Like,
right.
We're all busy. And this is not my full-time job. Like, content creation it's not paying all of my bills. And so I think understanding what consistency looks like for you and being willing to scale up or scale down that's really important too. And I think that's a great point about just like, what does it look like to show the personal side of your life? And I think, or to show your personal life. And I think it's different for everybody. And I think it's okay to not share everything. I actually find that conversation or that topic interesting. Like, what is too much or too personal?
Where's the
line?
line?
For me, like, it's interesting or it's hard to kind of navigate that line between, okay, am I uncomfortable because I'm sharing too much, or am I uncomfortable just because this is uncomfortable? And that's why I like to focus a lot on just what I'm learning as a leader and as a human. People don't know necessarily that much about my personal life. I think they know I'm engaged. They know I have dogs and like they know where I live,
Sure.
but I don't share a lot. And then I have friends who share literally everything about their lives. And I do think it's just about like your level of comfort and the brand you're trying to build.
No, I completely agree. And, I'm always impressed or, when people can really be vulnerable and share those intimate details of their life, because in a sense, it does help you really connect with them on a different level. I've seen, in a lot of social media platforms, it's a great way to build up your personal brand and build an audience. But I absolutely agree. I think it's completely up to the person and what their comfortability is with what they're sharing and how much you actually want to share. Because I agree, I'm more like you, where it's like, I'm not going to talk about my mental health issues or my physical health issues or any of those things, but I'm more than happy to talk about what I've been through in the working world, what I've learned from it, how I've overcome different things in that capacity. But I'm not going to get too vulnerable when it comes to some of those really intimate details about my life. Yeah.
But you kind of just made something click for me. Like, that is you being authentic if you choose not to share all that stuff because it wouldn't feel natural. Like, that's just as authentic as somebody who does feel comfortable talking about like their marriage online or, their kids or whatever the case may be. And what I've always found fascinating about LinkedIn, I will say it's my favorite social media platform, at least to create content on. But what I find really interesting about it is I'd say like 70 to 80% of my pipeline comes from LinkedIn. It's all inbound. And the rest is like word of mouth and referrals. And I don't talk about marketing all that much.
Yeah.
I mean, you could.
Interesting.
I really don't, actually. What I typically do if I talk about marketing is I say, hey, I'm hopping on this webinar with Sprout Social or whatever. Like, come hang out with us. But my thought process has always been, well, this is my profile. I don't want to talk about marketing here, so I'm not going to. But like, I make my website, the Verbatim website, very accessible so people can easily go look at case studies and social proof. But my LinkedIn profile is where you get to learn about who I am as a person and as a leader and like who you'd be working with if you chose to partner with Verbatim. And so I really appreciate that there are multiple ways that people can show up online as well. And like personal brands can really be whatever you want, which is exciting.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. You can literally shape the trajectory of your life. How do you want to show up online? How do you want to build and shape and mold that personal brand? I've seen it I've seen people be able to pivot from the corporate space into solopreneurship or entrepreneurship because they've built a personal brand online. It's powerful.
It's very powerful. It can change your life.
Totally. Yeah. So when you're building out a campaign, do you start with the story or the goal? Like, are those, one and the same in your world, or how do you navigate that?
So are we talking about influencer campaigns?
Yeah, influencer campaigns.
Okay.
Yep.
So generally speaking, if a brand, for me, and the business I'm building, if I'm working with a brand and they don't have a solid idea of or grasp on their brand story or their mission and values or their messaging and positioning, they're probably not ready to partner with influencers. Might be a spicy take. I know a lot of agencies will work with them anyway. I won't. I think it's a headache for both parties, like for the brand and the creator. And so if you are getting ready to launch an influencer campaign, at that point you should have your goals locked in. So like this campaign, we're optimizing for just brand awareness. We're looking to drive like impressions, engagement, follower growth, so on and so forth. Or our goal for this campaign, we have a new feature that's being launched or released, and we're really looking to drive trial signups for the product. Because at that point, when you at least know what your overall goal is and the story that you're trying to tell at the same time, then you can decide which influencers you want to partner with. And so I kind of cheated. I think I cheated with my answer, but the story and the story should come first, but slightly before the goals, because you're taking a piece of that brand story and aligning it with the goals that you're trying to achieve for this specific campaign.
Love it. What's a moment in your career when you realized the power of asking, what is this story telling us?
Okay, funny story, but it was actually a time when I was trying to advocate for my team I was the team. So I was trying to advocate for myself to get more headcount and more budget. And so for context, I was a team of one and I was managing literally everything, but we'll focus on social for this conversation. I was managing social, kind of starting from scratch. So I built up our presence on Twitter, I think LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. And I was slammed because I was also managing demand gen and graphic design and everything else. It was a lot. So I was trying to advocate and pitch getting just one other person, even a part-time person. And so the story that I told my manager was, okay, this is where we started with our follower count and engagement rate, and this is where we are now. Look at this growth. Isn't that incredible? We're showing up online. And he was like, that's great. Can we attribute that to anything related to revenue or anything that the sales team is working on? And it was pretty early in my career, and that's when I realized actually the power of not just being able to tell the story, but then synthesize that information and figure out what the story is telling us. And this is an internal situation, right? It was internal to the company, but understanding, okay, yes, data, these results are great. What does that tell us about our audience, or what resonates with them, or what they're looking for, what their pain points are, how are we solving those through our content? Those were all the missing pieces that I hadn't bothered to really fill in for, in this case, my manager. And it just shifted the way that I approached storytelling in general. I'm a creative at heart. I love the storytelling piece, but if we don't take it to the next step or the next level and also understand, okay, what can we do with the results of this campaign or this story, then it's kind of just a moot point.
Love that. What's a common mistake that you see startups make when it comes to telling their story or really defining their brand voice?
Ooh, I think it's trying to sound too trendy. Okay, so I had a conversation with somebody about this the other day, about this rise in brands just sounding like OMG, Lay, BFF,
right.
Really, it's on brand or it's on trend. A lot of brands are doing it. But I was on TikTok and they're vacuum brands talking like that on social, and it's okay, this is just starting to get a little out of control. And if that is what your audience connects with, that's totally fine. But everybody's starting to sound the same. I won't say everybody, but a lot of brands are starting to sound the same because it's just the trendy way to show up online. But you're also not standing out. You're not building something unique to your brand. And so yes, maybe the trend is what you should be hopping on because it aligns with your brand voice or messaging or goals. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe you sit this one out and just focus on what you're building long term and what your brand actually stands for and represents, and make sure you're aligning with that.
Yeah. How do you figure that out though? It kind of goes back to what we were talking about previously, where, where's the line between figuring out what the trends are and going with the trends, and then kind of paving your own path when it comes to your brand voice?
Well, I think it relates back to what I mentioned about influencer campaigns. You need to have your messaging and positioning locked in, so you understand who you're speaking to, how you're speaking to them, how you show up online, how you show up offline, how you're positioning yourself in the market compared to your competitors, and what like corner of the internet or corner of your market are you trying to dominate? Because when you start with that, then you can kind of zoom in or narrow down to your content strategy. So like, okay, we know this is our brand messaging, these are our brand goals, this is our brand voice. So these are like the 4 or 5 content pillars, general, but like content pillars that will stay within, which then will inform which trends make sense for you as a brand and which ones don't, because you can always refer back to those brand guidelines. And I think it's especially helpful when you have a leader or like a CEO or CMO or VP who's saying, hey, I saw this trend on TikTok on it, and you can say, yes, we're actually already working on it, it totally aligns. Or if we go back to like our brand guidelines and our brand messaging, this actually isn't something that we should go after, but maybe the next one.
Yeah. If a company has 10 seconds to make an impression, what do you think they should lead with? The facts or the feels?
I mean, that's, oh gosh, I'm such a marketer. It depends. Like I need to know the brand. I need to know the industry.
She needs
are
the
we
data.
trying to connect? I need the data. Like, are we trying to connect emotionally? What is the goal for this post or this piece of content? There are times when you should appeal to somebody's emotional side, and there are other times when you need to appeal to something like tangible or technical. I think regardless, what you could do in that situation is make sure you're appealing to a pain point, like a very specific hard-hitting pain point, because at that point you're going to hit the feels and the other one.
Yeah, awesome. Brianna,
I know.
No, I love it. I love it. We'll take it. Accepted. Brianna, where can we find you on social media?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I feel like I live on there. I'm just at Brianna Doe, and then briannadoe.com.
Thank you so much for coming on today.
This was great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. I will be releasing episodes every Monday, so be sure to subscribe on the platform that you are watching this, give it a 5-star review, and we'll see you next time.